everyone. Thanks for being with us this morning for the opening luncheon for a climatic ambition. So I introduce myself. I'm Leah van Lijk, coordinator for climate. I thank you to be present with us, which is also opens the COP27. Before anything else, even if the event is virtual, with the meeting is in Jojage, which is known as Montreal, which has often been a meeting place for Indigenous people, including for the Odisoni and Anishinaabe nations. We wish to honor and recognize and respect these nations as traditional guardians of the territory on which we are gathering today, and we thank them for their hospitality. So this climatic change break luncheon is intersectorial, mostly virtual, but some in presence, initiated by the members of the Quebec Civil Society. It is an opportunity to listen and learn more about international negotiations and their impact on Quebec, to discuss how to get to know each other, but also to build together and demonstrate that there's a consensus on the need to raising climate ambition to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement and keep the global temperature limitation goal of 1.5 Celsius within reach. So all of our events are taking place in parallel with COP27, which takes place in Egypt at Sharm el-Sheikh. We know that the COP is a COP of justice, a COP where we'll see the states will have kept their promises. So we'll see if they've revisited their emission reduction plan, if they've put their money where their mouth is. But let's not forget that these major meetings are often exclusive summits. Not all countries are represented. The size of delegations are different, and not everyone can make it here. So with the dialogues, we want to recreate spaces for exchange and mobilization. The program is free and accessible to all, and you can all find it on the web link. During this opening event, we would like to thank all of financial partners, without which we could have not seen the light today. David Suzuki Foundation, Solidarity Fund of the Fédération des Travailleurs du Québec, the government of Quebec as part of the Green Economy Plan 2030, the government of Canada, and the Logic. And before leaving the floor to Jamie, I wish to mention to you that, as you have heard, the event is recorded. The event is also available from French towards English. So you have a small globe icon on the bottom right of your screen, which allows you to select the language in which you are most comfortable. And there will be a time for question and answers at the end of the panel. So I invite you to ask all of your questions in the chat during the discussions, and we will make sure that they have an answer during the Q&A session. So I invite Jamie to take the seat and have a good webinar. And thank you very much. Are we hearing me correctly? Yes. So I'm introduce I'm glad to be with you today. I'm a producer. I've been a student activist, and I'll be the facilitator today. We are supported by Caroline. Hello, Caroline, Director of Internal Policy, Philippe Lapointe, which is Counselor at FTQ Construction, and Ganasawan Nidir, Kevin Deer. I'll do the introduction in English to do justice to the language.
Ceremonies, songs, speeches, and dances of the Mohawk people. He lives in Ganawage Mohawk territory, situated on the south shore of Montreal, and has been employed as a school teacher at the Garigna Nona Mohawk Immersion School since 1989. In the older traditional teachings of the Longhouse, he is faith keeper, resource person on Iroquois worldview, philosophy, treaties, land claims, and Native European historical perspectives. Nice to have you all. Merci tout le monde. Avant de commencer, par contre,
thank you, everyone. And before beginning, we'll invite you to answer a poll that you should see appearing on the screen. There'll be 3 questions which will display to know in which state of mind facing the COP you are. The questions are there. The first is, do you usually follow international negotiations? I'll let you answer. The second, which is below, what is your level of expectation of COP27? The third, Do you see a line between international negotiations in Egypt and Canada and Quebec?
So do I begin now?
Yeah, give me a second. So I'll introduce you right after the poll being answered right now.
I'm sorry, there was a little delay there.
No worries. Vous allez pouvoir voir les réponses là, comme c'est là. Je pense qu'on est.
We'll have to look at the answers now. I think that the participants have had the time to follow up on this.
Ça dépend des années.
It depends on the years.
Sur la question 2,
For question 2, the expectations for COP27 is medium. It'll be interesting for panelists too. And there's a link have said that there's a link between Canada, Quebec, and the COP. So I think that on this we'll be able to begin. I'll let you inspire from that for your talk. So I will start speaking in English. The interpreter will be there to do the translation. And I think that should be clear enough. How to click for interpretation on the bottom with the globe. Yes, absolutely. There's a globe on the bottom right, and you select the language that you wish to listen the conference into. Thank you, Leah. So Gana Sohan.
I'll ask you a basic question, and then I'll give you the mic and the floor will be yours. As an educator, knowledge keeper, and faith keeper, what do traditional teachings that you carry tell us about the current climate crisis?
Well, first of all, as a person of the Longhouse, all of our sacred ceremonies, songs, and dances are all about the perpetual rejuvenation of life. We have our own creation story that talks about the earth as being a woman, a mother, and she's providing us with all of this unconditional love. And all that is required of us is that we express our highest form of gratitude, which is done through sacred songs, dances, speeches, and rituals. Not only for the earth, but everything that works in conjunction with that, to our grandfather, the thunder beings, our elder brother, the sun, our grandmother, the moon, the stars, the star knowledge, the star people, because we're associated with the Pleiades constellation. And all of this is all part of this sacred web. And our role and responsibility in that, as I said, is to always be grateful, to only take what we need, to share, to cooperate, and to always be thinking about the future generation so that when they will be born, they will inherit a happy, safe, clean, beautiful, peaceful, loving home. But if you look at the monetary system and how it works, it has us all, for lack of a better word, enslaved, because it's all about this whole idea of extraction, manufacturing, producing, buying, consuming, and then throw it away. Well, where's away? There's no such thing as away. All of these things are accumulating, and they're coming back, and they're putting the humans back in their place, because humans have this attitude that they're superior to the natural world. But now what Mother Earth is doing through all of these, the earth heating up, the ice caps are melting, the new diseases and sicknesses, because humans are going to have to learn a hard lesson that all of us, if we don't get in line with how we're supposed to be, a majority of us are all going to be gone in a very short period of time. And we're going to have no one to blame ourselves. We could tap ourselves on the back for a good job done, that we were so smart that we brought ourselves to human extinction. So where we are right now with all of what's happening, some of the scientists are saying that if there's any hope, that we have to adopt the indigenous thinking and understanding about how we're supposed to live in communion with the natural world, and change what we do, because our lifestyles and everything, is all about this whole idea of taking. One of my spiritual mentors, he talks about, if we're going to really put some concrete actions, then we got to be like the Amish. Have a horse and buggy, have no electricity, go back to a natural way of living, and then hopefully we'll have some ways of doing that. But how many of us can do that? And can we do that? I don't know. Everybody's talking about, we got to get off of fossil fuels. Well, if we get off of fossil fuels, that means we're not getting in planes, we're not flying around, we're not doing all these different kinds of stuff. So then how do we effectively do that? The other thing that needs to happen is that everybody has to start staying home, except going into the cities for, if you would say, like the major necessities that need to be done. People need to be put on basic monthly income, stay home, make a garden. Don't be using your car as much as possible. Staycations instead of vacations. Everybody has to start making these personal sacrifices if we're going to have a hope. So our teachings and what we say, even our people, a lot of us, because we've all bought into this whole idea, the education system, what it's done to us. If I wanted to live like my ancestors, I don't have those survival skills about how to go and live in the forest with hunting and trapping. And even if we did that, if everybody did that, those animals would all be extinct in a very short period of time. So we have to start looking at greenhouses. We have to start looking at how we're going to look at food sovereignty, water sovereignty, so that our basic needs could be met. And this big imbalance that exists in the world, because everything is all based on relationship, and the relationship is already here. It's already explained about how we're supposed to, be as brothers and sisters in this relationship. But right now it's like this. And as I said, if we don't start to do it ourselves, Mother Earth will do it. And when she decides to discipline, she has no mercy, none. We're all going to suffer big time. So it's in our hands now. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So I can continue on. And the other things too is that, when we look at who we are in our creation story, we are walking clay, all of us, because we're all made of the clay of the earth. So don't wait till you're dead and you go back into the womb of your mother to understand that as walking clay, we're supposed to be the eyes, we're supposed to be the ears, we're supposed to be the voice of our relationship with our one common mother. And when we look at, what's happening with all of these conference of the parties, this is the 27th one now, there's different perspectives, because there are some scientists that I'm following that are using the year 1750 as their baseline. Because if you look at the New World, all plentiful it was, there was millions of buffalo that were roaming the plains. The trees used to be so huge in this land, and everything is getting depleted. It's going down, 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 down. It's diminishing. And there's another group of scientists that are using the Industrial Revolution of the 1880s as their baseline. So when we look at the 1.5 degree global warming that we're supposed to keep in check, there's two different, if you would say, data. Now, which is the right one? As a native person of this turtle island, I would say that we have to use the 1750 baseline because of the amount of wealth. And I don't mean monetary wealth, but natural wealth that existed. And now when you use that one, we're really in a predicament, because some of those tipping points have been passed now, and we're seeing it, and there's no way we're stopping this. So now what do we have to do? So we have to start, all of us, being content with what we have, and having to have to do with less, because we all cannot maintain the status quo. And if people are thinking, yeah, it's always going to be this way, well, we're going to be for a rude awakening, because that can't happen. The other thing is, when we talk about indigenous wisdom, in 1990, there's a group in South America, they're called the Kogis. They produced a video, it's called From the Heart of the World, the Elder Brothers Warning. And even at that time in 1990, they said, we have to, we are the older brothers, you are the younger brother. You have to listen to what we're trying to tell you, because if not, you're bringing this earth to a place that is not going to be sustainable. And heck, that was what? That's over 32 years ago. And what has changed? Nothing. It seems that now we even have a war. You know, and all these people that are blowing up buildings, blowing up, they don't consider the earth. Every time there's a bomb that hits the earth, the mother, our earth mother, she feels that in a different way. Maybe we don't think of it as feelings, but because everything is a sacred web and everything is connected to each other, whatever we do to the web, we're doing to ourselves. So we're all in this together. And people that think they can bomb and destroy and all of that, they're affecting the whole, if you would say, the whole unit, because none of us are separate from each other. There's just one mother. We're all connected as a human family. And we now have to come to this place in time where we have to put our best thinking forward. You know, we talk about these institutions of higher education, you know, Harvard, Yale, McGill. Well, then if we have all of this knowledge, why can't we come up with something that says, let's preserve and let's protect this one mother that we have? You know, let's stop going to the moon. Let's doing all of this ludicrous stuff. And let's focus on what we have to do right now and what we have to do right now, because this whole earth is the Garden of Eden. We have no right to destroy it. So let's bring it back to pristine, how it was when we were given the right to live here, and keep it in the best that it could be, so those future generations will inherit a happy, safe, clean, beautiful, peaceful, loving home. Because look what they're going to inherit. Greta Thunberg says, I ain't going to live to be an old lady. So how else would you like to go with this? You got any other question?
Yeah, I do, of course. Thank you for that so far. I'd be curious to see what you think about. Oh, puis, I'll just say a quick word in French too for everybody listening. Je vous invite à laisser des questions.
I invite you to leave questions in the chat if you have any. Furthermore, Philippe and Caroline, if you have questions for the other panelists, don't be shy. The panel wants to be a discussion, so if you have questions and ways and comment what Kanaswan said, go freely. Okay.
I'd be curious to see what you think about things like COP27, COP26, or the big international conferences that use, you know, politics as a means for change. You know, you could talk pretty like freely about just politics in general as a means to tackle the climate crisis, and even more so if you want to address politics on the international level. I'd just be curious to see what you think about all this kind of stuff.
Well, one of the things that I look at is that when we try to understand capitalism and, you know, this whole idea about making money, well, you know, when we ask ourselves, well, who's really running this world anyway? Well, it all comes down, well, who controls the money? And usually who's controlling the money, what I call, is the king, the new emperor, multinational corporations. Because there's laws that a corporation is even a human being now. And corporations will always put profits over people and even the environment. So what happens is when a lot of these governments get together, who sponsors them? It's all the big corporations. So the corporations are feeding them on one hand, and they're not going to bite off the hand that feeds them. So what happens is a lot of people go, yeah, they have these lofty ideas, they talk about these things, but in the final analysis, it's not really going to change. Because as I said, the monetary system and the way it dictates, we have to look at a different model. Because if we maintain the way things are going, the people that are in control and our power are not going to change. Because Wall Street and everything is all about profits. It's all about their profit margin. It's all about making money. And at the end of the day, we're going to be all suffering because we got to change that mentality. It's not about making money. It's about the preservation of the thing that sustains us every day. And what is sustaining us? It's Mother Earth. And what's our relationship with the earth? We got to start thinking about that. You know, every day, every second, we take a breath, right? We got to breathe. And every time we get in our cars and we're driving our cars, do we think about what's coming out of that exhaust? And maybe we shouldn't be driving our cars. Hardly anybody thinks about that. But we all have to start asking ourselves, if we're going to start to get off of fossil fuels, then that means we also have to start looking at our actions and how many of us are prepared to do that. This society has us all conditioned, it has us all seduced to buy into this, I don't know what you want to call it, but this machine anyway. And some of us have to stop and say enough of this craziness. But some people see it, they want to try to stop, but they can't do it alone. And even there's people that are protesting, that are trying to step up, you know, and make all of these changes. But hopefully we'll be able to do something, because time is of the essence. We have, you know, and I just hope that when these people get together, that they're not there for ego, they're not there for money, they're not there for manipulation and power and control, but they're really there as a citizen of the earth that says, as a small little child of this universe, what can I do then to make this changes? Because the only thing that we're going to change, we're not going to change nobody. We're not going to change those corporations and all of that. Only thing we could do is we could change ourselves. So if all of us, everybody says, all right, I'm not buying cars, I'm not going to buy fossil fuels, I'm going to get back to the land, well, then those people won't be able to, you know, run, because all of the things that they manufacture and they produce, people say, well, we don't need that anymore. So then they don't have the stocks, that's going to all fall. And then, so we have to start thinking, well, what is it that we need, and start moving in those directions, and people buy into that as a means of creating this change.
Yeah, I when people talk about whatever brings hope for a transition, they'd put sometimes like all their eggs in the basket of the people rising up, or they'd put all their basket in government to bring the proper change. But the way I'm hearing you speak is that you kind of see a more holistic version of it all, where it isn't necessarily different groups, but when change happens on the inside, all of these people together could then properly address the question. Is that what I'm hearing properly? Yeah.
Right.
Right. I'd like to talk about, I have two more questions, one proposed also. I can ask you that one right away. How can we collectively ensure that Indigenous rights are upheld in the midst of the transition? So a big question, I guess, how could we properly get that merging going?
Well, as I said, you know, we could talk about treaties. You know, when we talk about the Turo, right? We talk about everything that has to do with relationship. Or we can talk about the philosophy. You know, we talk about how we're supposed to be sitting underneath the great tree of peace with the white roots and the white head that represents the bald eagle that sits on the top. So we have to change our philosophies, because if our philosophy is not one that says, I understand that I'm in this sacred web, that everything is interconnected with everything else, that I'm only one little small person in this thing, but that we come from this idea that we understand that we are all, every human being is a spiritual being that is having a human experience. So if we understand that we are that, and we're supposed to be that, then we eliminate all the racism, we eliminate all the hatred, we eliminate this idea that we are superior to the natural world. And if we adopt this philosophy, all of the wars end, all of the rapes end, all of the environmental degradation, and even the self-sabotage, suicides, and all of that, because we understand that we're all sacred beings. But then how do we do that? We need a new paradigm that says that, okay, I get it now, that my thinking has been opened up, that I see that I am truly this spiritual being that is having this human experience. But we have to open our minds up to this new paradigm, new way of thinking, because what we have is not working all over. So we can't be stuck in saying, that we have it all, because if it was so great, well, then why are we bringing it to where we're bringing ourselves to extinction? Because it isn't. There's something that is lacking. And for me, it's the whole totality, as I said, that says that this is all a spiritual experience. Now, how do you bring that about? So the native teachings of this turtle island anyway reinforces this idea about how we're interconnected with everything else, and we have to understand that relationship. And the only way we can do it is through unconditional love. I say unconditional love because a lot of people talk about love, but it's conditional. Well, as long as we're the same political party, we're okay. As long as we're the same religious belief, we're okay. But the minute somebody deviates, well, okay, well, now I got an issue with you. No. If we all came from this place of unconditional love, we love each other, then we can go to this next level of how we can make this change. But if we're going to be stuck in ideologies that's all about conflict and me against you, well, then how can we save the world when we can't even save ourselves? And the only way we could do that is we need another way of thinking and understanding. And the only way we could do it is through conferences like this, where we talk about it and we share ideas, and we're coming from this place of saying, well, this is only what I can contribute. I don't know everything. I'm just one little small person, but if we all put our best collective thinking, hopefully, we can save ourselves.
Absolutely. And this sort of like the spiritual consciousness, that sort of oneness that you have with nature and other people around you, you seem to talk like as if it should have been part of human nature. It's something that we should have right now, but something in society and in the paradigm sort of took that away from people. It took away that spiritual consciousness. I'd be curious to see what you think that is. What took that ability for us to feel connected to nature and to people around us?
Well, it's different worldviews, because, I was raised as a Catholic, and in the biblical teachings that I heard about Adam and Eve, it says that, well, when God made them, they have dominion over everything that creepeth. Therefore, ye shall be fruitful, multiply, and destroy the world. Come on. If I was the creator, if I was God, I would never tell my children, destroy my creation. Never. I would say, if you honor me and you respect me, then respect my work. But so there was that happened. And then the other thing was money. Because once people developed this idea of money, then what happened? Now it starts to set people up where it's now the haves versus the have-nots. Our people here, we never had money. We didn't need it, but yet still we had leadership. We still had chiefs, we had clan mothers, we had people that knew how to get together and counsel for the benefit of everybody and the future generations in a moneyless state. So the minute we introduced money, now we have all of this conflict because it creates all of this imbalance. And with money comes power, manipulation, fear, control. And then that's why now it's like a seesaw that's out of whack, because now you have the rich people, the ruling elites that are setting the laws and dictating everything that happens. So if we got rid of money, what happens? And gold and silver too. Then we bring everybody back that all we are just people. No hierarchy, no kings, no queens, just people that have to unconditionally love one another, work together to make it better.
And we probably have time for one last question now. So I would tend to strongly agree with you. The different worldviews, different perspectives make it a lot harder to come to agreements. And being aware that now we have the COP, right? COP27, where it's going to be a gathering of a bunch of different perspectives and a bunch of different worldviews. And we have people here today Andréane, Philippe, and Caroline, and probably other people as well who are there now at the COP, trying to push for virtuous and good change. What would you have to say to these people so that they could stay confident and courageous and keep fighting the good fight?
Well, as I would say, we are all children of the universe. We all know what we need. So what I would say is to all of them that are there, come from the place of the heart. Stop and reflect that sometimes open yourself up to the cosmic intelligence and ask for that divine knowledge, wisdom, understanding, so that you can articulate in the best possible way, using unconditional love to hopefully open up those minds of those ones that maybe are not really seeing the big picture. Because we have to come to this time now where, as I said, we're all hurting. Every human being today is hurting. And we need what I refer to sometimes as a worldwide condolence ceremony. And in our grief and in our hurt and pain, that we all begin to see different, that we all begin to hear different, that we all begin to speak different. And together we start to do the work that has to be done on a different level if there's going to be any hope for those future generations that are coming. So as Greta Thunberg says, that she can live to be an old lady and have the quality of life that we have.
Thank you very much, Kanasohan. Always very appreciated to listen to you. Having you here this morning allows us to ground the rest of the conversations in core issues of land sovereignty, climate justice, and it keeps us, it lets us have a really critical perspective of that usual Western philosophy. So yeah, thank you very much. I'll invite you to stick around if you want to as well.
Yeah.
There'll be more conversations in the future, and if you need translation, there's a little globe at the bottom right on. Okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Now,
okay,
je retourne au France.
I will swap back to French. That's perfect. So we'll move on to you, Caroline, now. I see that there was no question in the chat. Again, I invite people to ask questions freely. Same thing for panelists which are participating. And Caroline, are you there with us? I'm sorry, I am at the COP and we have Wi-Fi problems, to name a few. So my excuses for the delay and difficulties and connections, which maybe will not be ideal all along this conversation. But first, I would like to thank the gang of the dialogue, of the invitation, and also of Kanasohan. It is really an honor to share this space. Interpreter apologizes, the image has frozen and the audio feed has ceased. Words which were shared with along. And Jamie, did you want that I launch interpreter? Yes, Caroline, maybe close your camera if you're capable. I think that the priority is to have the words because it's cutting off and we don't hear you anymore. Interpreter apologizes, the sound feed has interrupted and appears that the communication has ended with Caroline. I'll give her a few moments and maybe we can move on to Philip. Philip is good, the connection is good for you? Yeah. So we could turn to you, Philip, and by the time that Caroline finds her connection, I ask a basic question. Yes, certainly. So the FTQ, for those who do not know, it is a union of workers here in Quebec. It's a large union. And the question is very simple. What is their role that workers will have at the COP27? Well, as a matter of fact, the COP27 is a lot of discussions happen on what should we do to reduce the greenhouse gases and adopt measures to fight back against the increase of greenhouse gases, which does in such a way that inside all of this, we find ourselves workers to be either vectors of change, either of being people which will have to transform the way in that we work. So it's as simple as that. And by being present, we can facilitate and encourage the parties to adopt a social dialogue and to ensure that it is people who will have to operate and live the transformation of productions which will happen. It's funny because what we notice quickly when we are in a COP, which is some sort of a technocratic meeting and governmental meeting, pretty obscure, is that we are not the only ones to experience the pressure to transform ourselves and also to experience the pressure to experience climatic change pressures. So we see quickly that around the issue of human rights, there is a union which is done with indigenous groups. There's a union which is done with women's groups, with gender related questions, and even some countries call upon unions and the ones present at the COP to sometimes have some sort of a negotiation power with countries which have no consideration for the issue of human rights. And just examples that we have right now, there in some articles, there's just one single word which it is at the national convenience to respect or not human rights by applying the objectives of reduction of greenhouse gases. So this also makes a lot of sense when we are in Egypt, and we are even more. It is even more necessary that we serve as people who can tackle that question without fear of too much retaliation. We are the first ones to be able to think on the level of what it's going to change on the ways of working because we operate it. And there's a lot of environmental questions which are related to production and in the way to operate. And I'll give an example that I know pretty well, that of the FTQ construction, which has adopted a plan where we're talking about circular economy. And in the end, when we talk with the workers, it seems obvious when we speak with the employers, well, there's often a question of, well, nobody's going to want to do it, this and that. And at the end, we've participated in some initiatives where if we put selection in the work sites, people spontaneously do it, but nobody wanted to uh, pay for it. And we become initiators of that instead of it being the employer doing it. We always think that it's employer which will initiate these changes, and we're going to wait for a long time if we wait for that. And it becomes a union request now to have a sorting bin to sort all of the materials that we receive uh, in landfill. So that's one practical example of gestures that we can do and that we can bring on here because I'm going to do a presentation uh, for people who have the same considerations around the world. And obviously, when comes the time to adopt the fine tuning of some resolutions for the COP, we will go and see our governments and ensure that they have taken consideration that the social dialogue is important. So that's it. Yes, absolutely. Super. I have a quick question for you. You are in which area? We hear you very well. We hear you. Oh, yes, I'm in the area of constituencies of the observers. So it's like our office where we can work. And there's not that many people. She's an environmental group besides mine, the governmental NGOs. So I'll pass on the word to Andréane and Gaia. Gaia, I'll let you do that. So thank you. Well, we were mentioning at the beginning that there was states or groups which were more reluctant facing change and which would oppose even I think Caroline responded.
Comment est-ce que la question elle vient un peu de côté là? Comment est-ce qu'on peut faire pour motiver
How
ceux
can
qui
we do in such a way to motivate those who are reluctant, or in other words, how we can give more teeth to the agreements which are the result of COP27 of the COPs?
Ouais.
As a matter of fact, wow. Well, we'll see each other tomorrow. No, as a matter of fact, the thing which is important to look at through all of this is that they are agreements that if there's an agreement at the end of the COP27, there's often we leave with the intent of adopting an elephant and we leave with a mouse. The important thing is that Canada had objectives that they haven't reached. Nobody's going to sue them for that. So we work a lot on language to be introduced. So and when we speak to our governments, we can refer to something and hold them accountable. So the issue with that, outside of civil society, there's few people who keep their states accountable for their climatic inaction. So it is important that people of civil society, whether it be unions, whether it be environmental groups, whether it be women's groups, or whether it be indigenous groups, that they be present to be able to make the point that when the words that you will not include, or the phrase that you will, sentence that you will do in a different way of what would be beneficial for Canadian civil society, or regardless of whichever other country, we will have you pay for it. And that's a bit what's going on. We see some of our leaders, we are face to face, we go to the Canadian pavilion, we find lobbyists from Investissement Quebec, and we say, well, if you refuse to meet us now, you can be sure that there's an article that you'll have an article which states that you didn't want to meet with us. And it's not just a commercial mission here, it's also a place where we make political decisions.
Très bonne réponse. Ouais,
A
ouais.
very good answer.
C'est une super belle réponse.
That's a super good answer.
Par la suite, est-ce que
Afterwards,
est-ce que tu es confiant en fait que
are you confident that workers, not only here in Quebec, but everywhere around the world, can have this influence on states and deciding bodies? Depending on the social model in which we are, there obviously is variable parameters on the hundreds of union delegates and that we meet every morning. We all have different realities, and there are some places where the participation of workers is perceived more naturally. I have in front of me a colleague from Sweden and one from Norway and all of that, and for sure the dialogue is easier. Same thing in England, but we also have comrades which come from Africa or Latin America, a few from Asia. The union movement in Asia isn't very powerful, or doesn't have the same history as we do, so which does in such a way that their potential to call upon the government and have this power relationship is not the same.
Ouais, ouais, je comprends absolument.
Yes, I understand absolutely.
On va attendre que Caroline se
I will wait
connecte.
till Carolyn connects. There's about 5 minutes left.
J'ai une autre question qui était
I have another
plus
question, which is perhaps more personal. As a matter of fact, to participate to COP, we were facing compromises. Just the fact of traveling, there's many contrasts in relation to that, but we have to understand that there are compromises which are necessary for a broader change. And
simplement curieux de savoir comment
I'm curious to know, how is it possible to navigate through those compromises? What kind of ethics, what kind of work? Personal question. I think it'll be useful for people who want to adopt change. No, it's I think it's important to answer. To travel to Egypt would not necessarily be the kind of gesture which I find is ecologically the most, in terms of checks and balances, there would be a way to engage that discussion, maybe otherwise. However, what I think is important that we realize when we are outside of our home And even furthermore, when we are outside of with telework, it is the reality that other countries can have, other civil societies in our cases. The most important thing that I notice is that in Africa, there's a lot more African delegations which are present, and by meeting them, and the majority of the discussions which I'm engaging for the last 3 days, it's people who are looking for their way. And I wouldn't have that discussion if it wasn't to say open and close your microphone on a Zoom conversation. But by meeting these people, I've been able to speak to a woman from Kenya when she was surprised to see union representatives, and we started to talk about what we do. And she says, yes, me too, I'm working with the union, and we would like to include them in the process to talk about what we do. Then I met another lady. She came from Mauritania, and she's working exactly on the issues which interest me here. And we did a parallel meeting in which I explained the things we did. She's explaining what she does in Mauritania to build the cursus education curriculum for workers. And briefly, it's the kind of opportunities that I would not have in other types of meetings, and it allows us to see what's possible. I think that every time I have that kind of meeting, it allows us to justify this travel, and hopefully in the long term, our advocacy, carbon emissions will be spared. And we're trying to erase our carbon footprint by other means. I think that's a very good answer. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, and it does a connection with what Caroline was going to talk. The last question, there's only about 2 minutes left. Is there a particular project, a particular file on which you are working, something that you hope to be successful with? As a matter of fact, I'm working in the construction industry, and I'm interested. There's right now a huge pavilion on the um, building world pool building. They don't think of what's necessary for workers and how to include them in the process, or mostly how to ensure that local workers can apply the technologies which they hope to implement. Sometimes it resembles neo-colonialism. We're going to build the houses in Germany, and we're going to place them on your land. So I'm trying to speak about this, and I'm a bit of a strange thing which comes in their meeting, and they're starting to know me. We're going to get a question from Philip, and they have a coffee in the morning, a morning networking coffee, and I'm always there. And at the end, uh, uh, so my objective is that they speak about us, and there's also inside of all of that, there's our own governments. We try to find a way to speak to people or to put them in the corner without intimidating them. Well, you feel like it, I'm here. So we talk a bit and we network, because these people always find a way not to see us on the outside, and here they don't have a choice. So super. Thanks for the feedback, and thanks for all. Again, I invite you to remain. If you have questions and comments, feel free. I will move on to Caroline. Caroline, maybe we can do a small test. Yes, test. Can you hear me? Yes, I think the sound is good. Thank you, Caroline, for being there. Do you want to talk as was planned? I can leave you. What we had as base questions was the relationship between climate justice and the COP and social and economic and health crisis and biodiversity. How all of these crises could be tackled in the COP27. I can leave you on this. Perfect. Thank you for your patience. It's really where you're experiencing live to find a Wi-Fi and connect. So my apologies. It'll be an honor for me. It's an honor for me to be here with Sana Soham and Philip, and the network Action Climat Photo, we are the broadest network. Inaudible to interpreter, sound is breaking off, my apologies. On climate change of the West Coast to the East Coast, through going through north of Canada, and they include environmental GNOs, but also great Canadian unions, indigenous groups, youth groups, grassroots groups, and many more. So we are a coalition. We are here because the COP27, as said Philippe, is a COP in African soil. The African continent is responsible globally for about 2% of the world emissions of greenhouse. Sound is breaking off, my apologies, of the population of its territory, and at the same time of the climatic crisis, the needs of the African continent, but also on the links between the crisis, as you were saying, Jamie, and I think that there's an important issue to identify in the context, and as was mentioning, Philip, was to understand that sound is breaking off. Interpreter apologizes. The sound is unintelligible in the communication, which is breaking off badly. My apologies. Inaudible to interpreter. And social justice is all these forms. We are a convergence of crisis. We can think about the inflation crisis, what I like to name the just inflation, because it is mostly driven by the increase of prices and gas, and international crisis with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which causes food crisis everywhere around the world. We are experiencing inaudible to interpreter. We can say that the pandemic is officially over, and I think that the public health crisis has demonstrated that what type of cooperation, international cooperation, was set forth by the countries, meaning that access to vaccines, for example, the northern countries first, which did in such a way that the southern countries have a low vaccination rate. So this conversion of crisis is important. It's important to tackle it by killing several birds with one stone. In 2022, I think we have the luxury to confront one crisis at a time, and not only that's what we need to do to respond to the crisis, but also because this will allow to leave no one behind, to have an intersectoral approach, a transformational approach, as Kenneth Hunt was saying, to talking about problems, whether we talk about capitalism, colonialism, that's what will allow us to get us out of several poly crises. I don't know how to name them, because what we're experiencing today, unfortunately, sound is cutting off. My apologies, and inaudible to the interpreter. To be honest, and as a starting point, it doesn't mean that we've talking about hope in the talks. It's not going very smooth. We need an answer, transformational answer, and historically, people, by working together, social movements have been able to change things. So we must continue in that tradition to have governments act. Okay, thank you very much. It's cutting off from time to time. I don't know if that's something that you could do, Carolyn, to improve the sound quality. We hear about 80% of what you're saying, for as long as there's not too many things, important things in the 20%. What advances the COP have brought up to now to address the poly crisis, as you've named them? Well, I'm sorry. I'll try to connect on my computer while I'm talking. I think that we need to start with base needs of who has requested that the COP be implemented. And as a matter of fact, it is a small insular countries, African countries, who took the initiative to set forth these international meetings, multilateral, where they have a voice. Inaudible to interpreter, sound is cutting off. When we're in a negotiation room, inaudible to interpreter, sound quality. We have right to speak as much as the US and
Est-ce que les cotes nous ont de température de l'accord de Paris jusqu'à date? Non.
Paris Accords? No, but I think we have to note that there are progress which were done. The Paris Accord, give me a moment. I'll try to be, I think I can connect with my other computer. Interpreter apologizes. Sound quality on this call is extremely bad. My apologies for the bad quality of interpretation. I cannot interpret any better than what I'm hearing. Maybe not. What I wanted to say is, I'm sorry, the Paris Accord has flexed the curve. We were heading towards a 4 degrees Celsius catastrophic, and now we're at 2.7 degrees. What's also devastating, but we must recognize the progress which was accomplished, because as I was saying a while ago, it is the social movement which changed things, and the fact that people from everywhere in the world have mobilized to get to this agreement, that they be present every year in solidarity. We're talking about northern with southern movements, representatives of indigenous people, workers, youth. Inaudible, sound is breaking out. So this mobilization is important to recognize that we have step victories, and it's by continuing to get working together that we'll be able to keep our governments accountable. Interpreter apologizes, sound quality is breaking out. I'm strongly agreeing with you that the social movements play a great role on the pressure which is imposed on the states. But why? I'd like to agree on what the link there is between the social movements and the states, because there are strong mobilizations which are occurring, but I think that the states in such play an essential role, because we're talking about resources when we're talking about states. So how do you see the relationship between both? Why are states necessary in the transition? Well, as a matter of fact, it's a power relationship that we're building. The social movements play a part, not to replace states, but and I think that there's a lot of work which is being done to set forth institutions, alternative ways of operating, which are important to name also, but the social movements build a power relationship to have the governments flex. That's their objective. And Jamie, I think we can be the equity of resources, the fight against climate change is a power struggle. And that's what was naming Canasohon earlier. It is the national oil and gas companies which invest billions of dollars in disinformation campaigns, the lobby of governments. It is them which have slowed down and sabotaged climatic action. So we know that burning oil and gas causes problems. So we absolutely have to, in our answer, tackle to this power struggle to this. And the only way that we can do it, historically inaudible to interpreter. I think that Philippe from the FTQ can talk a lot. Unions, that's what they're seeking to do. It's the same thing that we must do. And I think that the panel we have this morning indicates to us that the way to build the power relationship is to have the broadest coalition as possible, to join forces amongst movements, because there is no climate justice without social justice. Absolutely. Maybe we can open the discussion. And Philippe, could you ask the question to have social mobilization to this change? Yes, of course. As was saying Caroline, we will all be subject to climate changes, and this power relationship is more than necessary. Specifically, not too long ago, the union milieu was perceived as being hostile to organizations, pro-environmental organization, but there was an excellent work, and I wish to congratulate the environmental movement and the organizations that you are part of for the way that you've been able to place the this disquisition in the public space, which does in such a way that finally the environmental advocates which are inside unions have been successful in creating an agreement between our issues and the ecological disquisition, and that is really a great success, which today is fruitful. And it's that kind of preliminary accord that we must be able to create with other groups and to continue to do. And I think that just the presentation from Mr. Deere at the beginning shows us to which point at the final nobody's besides the point. We are right. Now all we have to do is to rally the power report, which is lacking. Super thanks. Caroline, Philippe, and Ganasawan, I invite you to respond to comment from now on. I have a question which will be targeting all three of you. We'll ask it in English because it will.
I have your mic is on mute right now. I have a question for you. You ready?
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the concept of debt, responsibility and debt. Not like traditionally, debt has been understood as like a financial thing. If you give me money, I'm going to owe you money, and that's a debt I have towards you. But I'd like for us to rethink that concept right now, especially in terms of international relations. Because if we cause damage somewhere else, we have a responsibility to sort of repair that damage. And I just would like to hear you all comment or say, if you had to change the conception, change the definition of debt, how would you change it?
Well, as for me, as I said, the whole idea of money is a foreign concept. In my opinion, we got to get rid of it. We're all sacred beings that come to this planet for a short period of time. So let's ask ourselves, what is our gift to the world? Let's polish that up and let's be the change that we come, because when we understand we're spiritual beings, then we're gonna accentuate this whole idea of unconditional love and beautifying this planet. And when you look at the monetary system, it's all debt-based. The only reason why this whole economic engine runs is because somebody has to be in debt. So if we understand that, why do we keep feeding this thing that is never gonna right itself? We need a new monetary model. Why can't our monetary model be our love? Let our currency be love. We love one another. We can still have manufacturing and do whatever we need to do, but we all do it because we're doing it for the benefit of the common good. Because as long as we maintain this present monetary system, we're never going to change nothing. Because we're always going to be in debt. It's always going to be the haves versus the have-nots, and we're not going to be able to change it.
Absolutely. Caroline, est-ce que tu as une réponse à ça? Est-ce que tu veux ajouter aux questions?
Carolyn, did you have an answer to that? Did you want to add to the question of the debt question? The issue of debt.
That I actually don't think I want to add it.
Philippe, pour vous?
Philip, for you?
C'est bon. Thank you, guys, so much. Je t'ai pas remercié pour.
I did not thank you for your talk. I very appreciate it. We have a question of the public, which is coming out, which is cut out for you. What do you think to bring new the COP27 as the preceding COPs have failure after failure? Is it not because the decisions are made by environmental advocates? Listen, I think that the civil society, when it presents itself to a COP again, once more, it is to use its power relationship and as a lever. I don't think that anyone comes here. We often hear it's the COP, which is the last chance, as if a COP was going to change the world. I think that we must have an understanding of political and economic and social systems in which we are a bit finer than that. But the COP is a moment in time very important where there's a civil space to catalyze this inequity between power reports and bring on attention. So I think that civil society, the question that we must ask, why do environmental advocates are there? It's not only indigenous leaders are there, the most vulnerable countries representatives are there, the workers are there. So what would happen if we wouldn't be there? You know that last year there was a record presence of lobbyists, oil and gas lobbyists. And as I was saying earlier, by the fact that we have not been successful to flatten the curve of emissions, it is because of the sabotage role and of dilution role that are playing year after year this industry. The Canada Pavilion at the COP27, the consortium of biggest oil and gas companies in Canada that we call the Pathways Oil Sands Alliance, will be holding an event in that pavilion. I think that already there we are hearing people speak up against that. So we must be here to occupy the civil space, because if there's a civil space isn't occupied, we are not setting forth these fundamental questions of justice and of human rights. And if I may just quickly answer to the question of Sandrine in the chat, exactly, we must mobilize a coalizing movement broader than the popular movement, and we must decompartmentalize fights. That's why I find it's important, and why I'm honored, as a matter of fact, to be here with. It's funny that we put me in the box of the environmental advocate, because Philip is fighting just as much for climate justice, and just as the climate movement, and be in solidarity with indigenous fights and other union fights and indigenous. Yes, I would like to add, there's one thing that right now we don't, we continue to try to do pressure on the organization of the COP on the question of transparency. Do you see, can you imagine an advocate coming in with signs saying stop greenhouse gases, and is and being confiscated of this panel when they come through security. We have limitations on what we are allowed to do as actions. There's a lot of processes in relation to what civil society can do to express itself. However, there's not criteria. There's not anything about the signs of delegations with a sticker in their back for the lobby of fossil fuels. And there's nothing that resembles more a person with a tie than another person with a tie. And then we can find ourselves surrounded with people that are there with a role to encourage fossil fuels and to tell us that shale gas is, as a matter of fact, a replacement solution. So we really have to be careful to what we say, and it is a demand of many people that there be a lot more transparency to the role of people, present people have. Thank you very much, Philip. Gana, someone, do you want to respond to that for the next question?
I think I lost what the question was. Could you repeat the question again?
Well, the initial one was for
the initial question was for Caroline and the person in the chat.
Hope in the cops when they have been failure after failure for the past years. I could give you a few moments if you want to address that question.
I think I might have though when
Je l'ai peut-être fait dans ma dernière présentation inaudible à l'interprète.
Where we are with regard.
Nous sommes en ce qui a trait à.
I don't know why this is.
Je ne sais pas.
The English.
My apologies, interpreters error. Go on. This is an error by the interpreter. My apologies.
Yeah. As I said, we're in this dilemma now, and as I said, I'm not really sure how we're going to, get out of this because I don't know. I just say again, all of humanity's woes, there's a common denominator, and for me, it's monetary. So if we understand that and we know that, then we should be able to think out of the box and come up with these solutions. But as long as we want to maintain within the present structure of how this whole machine runs, we're going to be hard pressed to change it because, as you know, there's a saying that goes that something about how power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, but as I said, if each individual has this, I don't know what you want to say, this enlightenment, that like Gandhi says, you be the change that you want to see in the world. Well, then Margaret Mead says, don't ever underestimate a group of committed people to change the world, because that's all that ever was. So I'm always, optimistic that, we have all of these things now that are looking at us and staring us down. And we have to come from this place of being absolutely fearless, but coming from this place of empowerment, and not ever coming from this place of superiority, of manipulation, of power or control, but together we can make it better.
Thank you, Ganasohan. And Carolyn is approving your words in the chat there, sending you solidarity. We have a question for Philippe now. Philippe, il y a une question dans le chat que tu as sûrement vu.
Philip, there's a question in the chat for you. How do you think that initiatives and solutions just for workers will be suggested by COP20? What is the priority according to you, and what is the role of workers in the climatic action? We're cranking out pretty hefty questions today, aren't we? As a matter of fact, I don't think that there's going to be practical propositions in terms of what we will do with what type of worker and how we will reframe which type of work in this kind of thing. However, what happens is that it's the first COP where the just transition is extremely well framed, or at least brought on. We have a pavilion right now. Before it was just an idea or a concept. Now there's a hub which was created so that people of different milieus can meet, and that it would be known that this place is reserved to discuss of the just transition. It is organized by the International Workers Federation. We have 40 panels which are talking about just transition. It is repeated constantly. The issue we have is that there's different countries which don't have the same definition that we would want to have about a just transition. However, when we hear Stephen Guilbeault or Justin Trudeau talk about the just transition, their their definition is also a bit immobilism in relation to some jobs, because some workers could be affected. The definition we had is that if you are going to transform, the transformation means and take into account that people have their communities that have families, and that these people must be able to continue to live decently and find jobs which are equivalent. I've spoken about lately with a very important very involved with the petrochemical industry, a researcher which has studied how some plants had been converted to become exploration places, about what we can do with those in facilities. What could we do with the workers who knew how to operate a petrochemical plant, but with other chemicals other than petroleum to produce plastics or other things, how to reorganize them so that they don't be these greenhouse gas emitters. Their initiatives which are done. The idea by the workers which were ex-operators of this machinery, which become that's what we want out of just transition. Then that's what we must bring on. So what is the COP used for in that disquisition is that the most countries as possible have the same definition, so that we can refer to and be able to force the governments and force the businesses to respect these principles. And it's the same thing for that same commitments at the COP. If there's no civil society which is there to force them to respect them, well, it's just words in the air. And same thing for circular economy. I've just seeing that it's indeed we are great promoters of circular economy as part of that just transition. Thank you, Philippe. Maybe I'll read a comment from Lise and get inspired from that for the final words, because there's a few minutes left for the discussion. Everything is diluted to get to consensus at the end. Just the presence, put such presence on. I'm agreement with now social justice. There's no climatic justice. We can maybe do a roundtable. Caroline, I'll let you begin. Ending words and final words, if you judge necessary. Caroline, are you still with us? I'm sorry. I could not be more in agreement with Louise, not only because it's strategically and morally the right thing to do to work together, but also because when we look at the crisis that we're looking at, whether it be the energy or food crisis or the consequences of inflation, of speakers breaking up, my apologies, of biodiversity, our answers will have to be converging and at the scale of the challenges that we are presented. Okay, I know Caroline is on mute. Yes, I think that as a matter of fact, we must be present. Our role is to be observers, and maybe Caroline has left, but our role is to be observers and to ensure specifically the hypocrisy of our deciders in our lobbies do not go unnoticed. I would take the advantage to say that Donna, which has asked the question also on the fact that, in my opinion, the circular economy should be even more applicable in because in low industrial areas, because they're and base their models on this idea that materials are not infinite and that have a question of entrepreneurship and innovation around circular economy. I think that it's a concept which should be universal and apply everywhere. We have catching up to do, and we can do it with the business plan. I would end on this saying that thanks for your work, and I hope that you will continue, because we also need this at the COP to know that we are supported by civil society. I will leave the microphone to Gana Sahon, but first encourage people to fill in the poll, the satisfaction poll, which will appear at the end. It's supposed to end at 10 o'clock. And many thanks to the panelists, organizers of the opportunity. Very nice discussions. Thank you, everyone. And on this, I will leave the microphone to Gana Sohon. Gana,
final words to close the panel. I'm going to leave you the floor. Yeah, the mic is yours.
Well, only thing that I would say to conclude this is that we have to draw on whatever it is, I will call it the cosmic intelligence, because in this whole vastness of this galaxy, we're a little tiny speck, and this earth is always being bombarded with sunlight, with starlight, and also with ancestral light, because we all come from the stars. We're here for a short period of time. So let's ask that divine energy, whatever we call it, to give us the mind, to give us the heart, then to give us the words and the actions that we need in any other time more than anything, the knowledge, the wisdom, and the insight to save ourselves. Because everything was provided for us. The only thing that we were always asked was to have this attitude of gratitude, to thank everything, all of those gifts that we receive each day, that we could enjoy this life. And we've destroyed it. And we're continuing to destroy it. So we need help. Every day we got to start praying. We got to start asking for that knowledge and that wisdom, that hopefully together as a human family, we will get it and we will make these changes. So those future generations that are coming, like us, will be able to inherit a happy, safe, clean, healthy, beautiful, peaceful, loving environment. Because their face is coming up out of the soil. They're looking up to us, the people that are alive today, these generations, and we cannot fail them. So let's do our best, whatever that is, because we're all in this together now.
Thank you very much, Anna. A big thank you to everybody that organized. Un grand merci à tout le monde qui est là présent aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much for everyone present today. We must end the panel, and so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leia, and thank you, Gaia. Thank you, Naidita. Thank you, everyone.